Recently, we launched a new channel called Paranormally Listed. On the channel, we talk about unexplained phenomenon, including hauntings, cryptid encounters, and experiences with beings from out of this world. Here's a clip from our latest episode, 3 UFO Crashes that predate Roswell. The book claims that a UFO crashed in the desert near San Antonio, New Mexico on August 16, 1945, 2 years before the Roswell incident. No one saw the crash, but several people heard it and felt the ground shake. It happened late in the afternoon during a storm. 2 young brothers who were looking for a lost cow went to investigate, and they found a massive gouge in the ground. The brothers were interviewed decades later for the book. They said as they walked along the gouge, the bottom of their feet became hot. Then they found what they described as an avocado-shaped aircraft. It was about 25 to 30 feet long and 14 feet high. It probably weighed several tons. The boys touched some of the material from the ship and it reminded them of aluminum foil. They said that through a hole in the craft, they saw little creatures sliding around. You can watch the rest of this video, plus all the other paranormally listed videos, by clicking on the link below this video. We'll also have a link at the end of this video. But before we start today's video, we want to bring you a word from our wonderful sponsor, Magellan TV. I don't know about you, but it looks like this winter I'm going to be spending a lot of time at home. So I'm thankful that Magellan TV is constantly uploading new material. Recently, on their new releases section, I found a great documentary called The Murder of Lee Irving, Disability Made Crime. Even by my standards, this was a bleak and depressing documentary. It's about a young man who grew up with disabilities and he overcame so much, but then he met with a tragic and brutal ending. A lot of murders are senseless, but this one was particularly nonsensical. But all that being said, it's a fascinating documentary and I think you should check it out. This is just one documentary that Magellan TV has in their library. They already have 3,000 documentaries and 15 to 20 hours of new material is added every week. They have great true crime documentaries, but they also have awesome science ones, history ones, and some great biographies. Magellan TV has been a great, long-time sponsor, and they have a great offer for criminally listed viewers. Criminally listed viewers will get a 1-month free trial by clicking on the link in the description. So you can click on the link, or you can type try.magellantv.com/criminallylisted to get your month for free. Check out Magellan TV today because you'll find something great to watch and you'll be supporting Criminally Listed. Number 3. Timothy Fountain. On August 4th, 2007, just after noon, a delivery man arrived at Maggie's Food Store, which was a convenience store in Chicago, Illinois. In a pool of blood on the floor, he found the dead body of an older man. He ran out of the store and called the police. Officers arrived at the store and they found the man's body. He was identified as 75-year-old Nicholas Guerrero. Guerrero was a father and grandfather. He had 15 grandchildren. He had been shot to death. Guerrero had lived next to the store. He came into the store regularly to talk to the clerk, 37-year-old Graciela Rodriguez. The officers looked around the store, and in the back room, they found Rodriguez's dead body. The cash register was empty. So the police quickly concluded that Rodriguez and Guerrero were killed during the commission of a robbery. It turned out that the store had a surveillance camera, and it recorded the robbery. A man came in and purchased 2 lottery tickets. He then pulled out a gun. He took the cash from the register and then led Rodriguez to the back room, which was off camera, where he shot her in the head. The man tried to steal the surveillance tape, but he ended up grabbing the wrong one. The store had a system that the camera would start recording on a second tape later that day. The killer stole the tape that was supposed to start recording later. He left behind the one that recorded the robbery. After leaving the back room, the killer encountered 75-year-old Nicholas Guerrero. There was a struggle, and the gunman shot him in the head as well. The killer then left the store. He got away with about $500 and some cigarettes. The problem with the video was that it was too grainy to see the killer's face. A teenager was in the store shortly before the robbery, and he believed that he saw the killer. He described him to the sketch artist, and the police released the sketch to the public, but it did not generate any leads. Nearly 2 weeks after the double homicide, the case was at a standstill. The detective thought that maybe the lottery tickets held some clues to the killer's identity. It turned out that he had left the 2 tickets behind. One ticket had the numbers 5150 and the other had the digits 5157. He decided to run the numbers in the police database under addresses. He came upon a convicted robber named Timothy Fountain. When Fountain was arrested in the 1990s, he gave his address as 5157 South Union Avenue. It turned out that was his mother's address. The detective compared the sketch to Fountain's mugshot, and he saw similarities. The detective showed the teenage witness a photo lineup that included a photo of Fountain. The witness picked Fountain as the man he saw in the store. The police got Fountain's phone records, and he had made a phone call around the time of the murders. The call pinged off a tower close to the crime scene. The police managed to get a sample of Fountain's DNA. It was compared to DNA found under Graciela Rodriguez's fingernails. It was a match. In April 2007, Fountain was arrested for the 2 murders. 42-year-old Timothy Fountain went to trial in October 2012. He was found guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life without parole. The police credited the lottery ticket with helping identify Fountain. Had he not left a lottery ticket behind with his mother's house number on it, he may have never been linked to the double murder. 50-year-old Timothy Fountain is currently incarcerated at the Hill Correctional Center in Galesburg, Illinois. Number 2. Curtis Lee Watson. In 1976, 32-year-old Curtis Lee Watson got into some legal trouble because he violently kicked people out of his girlfriend's home in Washington, D.C. First, he ordered a man out of the house at gunpoint. A week later, he shot her ex-husband when he refused to leave the house. The ex-husband was injured but survived. Watson was arrested for both incidents. In June 1977, Watson was out on bail. On June 28, 1977, 19-year-old Timothy Reeves was found dead in the house. He had been shot and stabbed multiple times with a pair of scissors. Reeves and his mother had rented out part of the house. Reeves' mother had moved out on the day the body was found, and Reeves was planning on moving out on July 1st. But Watson had wanted Reeves to move out when his mother left so that they could clean up the area to rent it out to someone else. Watson was charged with Reeves' murder, even though there was no evidence connecting him to the murder. The gun was never found, and the scissors did not have Watson's fingerprints on it. There were also no witnesses to the murder. The police had concluded that since Watson had used violence against the other 2 men he wanted out of the house, he had also killed Reeves. In 1978, Curtis Watson had 1 trial for all 3 crimes. He was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to a total of 30 years of prison. Watson maintained that he was innocent of killing Reeves. Watson's lawyers filed 2 appeals. The appeal said that Watson going to trial for all 3 crimes at the same time confused the jurors. They said he should have had a trial for each case. The court did not agree, and his appeals were rejected. Watson served 10 years in prison. In August 1988, Curtis Watson was 44 years old. He was serving a sentence at Lauren Reformatory in Lauren, Virginia. At 3:50 p.m. on August 29, 1988, Watson called the Washington Post. He told a reporter that 20 minutes earlier he had escaped from prison and he was going to use his freedom to prove his innocence. After hanging up, the reporter who took the call phoned the prison. They said that no one had escaped. Then 7 hours later, the prison authorities learned that Watson was gone. He had been on a cleanup crew with little supervision. He got access to the pocketbook of a correctional officer. He grabbed her keys and drove off in her car. The authorities had no idea where he went. Months later, in April 1989, the story of Watson's escape was featured on Unsolved Mysteries, but it did not lead to his arrest. 6 years went by, and still no one knew where Curtis Watson went. Then in August 1995, a man named Carl Page contacted Jeff Baker, a reporter with the Montreal Gazette. They agreed to meet at a restaurant in Montreal, Quebec. At the restaurant, Page revealed that he was 51-year-old Curtis Watson. He had been living in Montreal since his escape from prison about 7 years earlier. During his time in Montreal, he volunteered with troubled youths, and he had even published a book of poetry. He worked for a transportation company and a refrigeration company. He also sold t-shirts that had positive messages on them. He even recently went on a local talk show to promote the t-shirts. Watson told Baker they had contacted him because he wanted to see if Baker could investigate his murder conviction and help him clear his name. After the interview, Baker did read about his case and admitted it was circumstantial. But Baker also called the U.S. Marshal Service. Baker's article about Watson appeared in the Montreal Gazette on August 15, 1995. By then, Watson had vanished, but the marshals were now on his trail. Months later, on Halloween 1995, he was arrested at a bus station in Phoenix, Arizona. In March 1996, for the escape, a year was added onto his sentence. He still had another 20 years to serve for his murder conviction. Had Watson not gone to a reporter and revealed his identity, he could have lived out the rest of his life in Montreal or another part of Canada, or possibly even the United States, and no one would have known he was a fugitive on the lam. After he was incarcerated, he continued to appeal his murder conviction, but none of his appeals were successful. Curtis Watson was released from prison in July 2018 at the age of 74. His current whereabouts are unknown. If Watson is alive today, he would be 77 years old. He has always maintained that he never killed anyone and he was wrongly convicted. Number 1. Jasper Stringa. In the spring of 1999, 16-year-old Marianne Vestra was living in the small village of De Vesteren, Netherlands. On the night of April 30th, 1999, Marianne had a night out with friends in the city of Colum. They went out to a club to celebrate Queen's Day. At the end of the night, Marianne set off on her bike alone. Tragically, she never made it home. The next morning, her dead body was found in a meadow near Van Closter, which is in between the club and her home. She had been raped and her throat had been slit. The brutal murder shocked the people of the area. Suspicion immediately fell on two men who lived in a refugee asylum center in Colum. They were arrested and their DNA was compared to the killer's DNA. The DNA was not a match, so they were cleared as suspects. One piece of evidence that the police found was a cigarette lighter with a Playboy logo on it. The lighter did not belong to Marianne. The police determined that the lighter came from a store close to the crime scene. DNA was found on it and it was tested. The test revealed it was the DNA of a white man. So the police concluded that the killer was a white man who lived close to the crime scene. But beyond that, the police had no idea who the killer was. In June 2012, 13 years after the murder, the public prosecutor's office decided to try something drastic. They asked for a DNA sample from every male who lived in a 3-mile radius of the murder scene when Marianne was killed. No one would be forced to give a sample of their DNA. Nor were the police going to trick anyone. Everyone was told they were investigating the murder of Marianne Vastra and they could voluntarily give a sample of their DNA. The police were hoping that a family member of the killer would submit their DNA and it would give them a smaller group of suspects to investigate. On September 29, 2012, they started collecting DNA from over 8,000 men living in 16 villages. 2 months later, the police were amazed when they learned that a match to the DNA had been found. It was not a familial match. Instead, they found a 100% match to the DNA. That meant the killer had voluntarily given the police a sample of his DNA. That man was 45-year-old Jasper Stringa. Stringa was a farmer who lived in Alvada, which is a village about 1.5 miles from the crime scene. He was married and he had 2 children. He didn't have a criminal record and he was never considered a suspect. Stringa was arrested and in custody he confessed to the murder. He was 31 years old at the time of the murder. He said on the night of the murder he wanted to clear his head, so he went out on a bike ride. He came across Marianne, who was riding her bike. He pulled her off her bike and she put up a struggle. So he put a knife to her throat and she stopped fighting. He then led her to a meadow. He raped her both orally and vaginally. Stringa then rolled Marianne onto her stomach and tried to strangle her with her bra, but he found it too difficult to kill her that way. So he dragged his knife across her throat 3 times. Stringa said that he had thought about turning himself in, but he said he wanted to watch his children grow up. In March 2013, 14 years after 16-year-old Marianne Vastra's murder, Jasper Stringa was convicted of killing her. In April 2013, he was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Don't forget to check out our podcast, Into the Killing. You can find it on Stitcher, Deezer, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere you find great podcasts. But that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.